Go ahead and turn in your Bibles to Leviticus chapter 20. Environmentalists in Florida have a problem. No one has seen or smelled a skunk in 5 years, according to conservationists. Because the skunk is not a protected animal under state law, there's fear that this cute, furry little animal can be hunted into extinction. If numbers are shown to be in decline, the state may need to declare them a protected species. And Kristen Nelson, the biologist commissioned to find the skunks, admits that she's taken a little bit of kidding over the subject. With their stinky spray, skunks have an image problem. She doubts that anybody's going to form a Save the Skunk Society. But Nelson isn't fazed. In fact, she says, every creature has some sort of importance in the ecosystem, even if we don't know what that importance is. Now, I've always been somewhat amazed at how passionate people can get about saving certain things. For example, there are those who want to save 100-year-old houses, and they will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and countless hours trying to restore those old houses to their former glory. Some people tie themselves to trees or lie down in front of bulldozers in order to save the forests. And then, of course, there are the countless organizations devoted to saving everything from the spotted owls to the killer whales. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't have anything against people who want to save things. I just find myself wondering, where's the passion for protecting human life? Amen. You see, it's easy to say every creature has some sort of importance in the ecosystem, even if we don't know what that importance is. But are we as quick to say that every person is important, even if we don't immediately recognize their contribution in this world? Amen. This morning we're going to tackle the subject of the sanctity of life. And what we're going to ask ourselves is two important questions. Are other people's lives important to me? Think about that for a moment. I know that I'm important to myself, my family's important to me, but in general, are other people's lives, do I choose to make them important to me? And the second question is, how are we going to help and protect the lives of those who cannot provide or protect themselves? How are we going to help? Let's get started by asking the question, why are some people so willing to take life? And it all started off innocently enough. Cain and Abel decided to show their devotion to God by making a sacrifice. And you remember Abel's offering was his firstborn lamb, the most precious part of his flock. And he brought that to God as his offering. Cain decided to offer some of his fruits, probably some of what he just harvested on his way to the place of sacrifice. And you remember the story, how Abel's sacrifice was received while Cain's sacrifice was not received. And the takeaway from all of that is that the value we place in the offering reflects the value we place in God. This idea that offerings show how much we value God, or at least how much we value His blessings, well, it stuck with people, even when they stopped serving the one true God and began to worship idols. Unfortunately, some people took the idea of sacrifice to a terrible extreme. As the Israelites moved into the Promised Land, they found that many of the people in that land sacrificed their children to an idol named Moloch. In fact, one burial site has recorded over 50,000 burned skeletons of small children and infants. What went wrong? What could possibly motivate a parent to burn their child as a sacrifice? The answer is money, or more properly, the answer is prosperity. You see, these people believe that if they sacrifice their most important thing to their idol, if they sacrifice their firstborn child, their idol would give them better crops and larger herds. That was the situation that the Israelites were moving into. And so I want us to hear the Word of God as God speaks to this issue of sacrificing children. Leviticus 20, beginning in verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, any Israelite or any alien living in Israel who gives any of his children to Moloch must be put to death. The people of the community are to stone him. I will set my face against that man, and I will cut him off from his people. For by giving his children to Moloch, he has defiled my sanctuary and profaned my holy name. If the people of the community close their eyes when the man gives one of his children to Moloch, and they fail to put him to death, I will set my face against that man and his family, and will cut off from their people both him and all who follow him in prostituting themselves to Moloch. It's easy to consider the infanticide of the ancient world and to think to ourselves, how barbaric. Something like that could never happen in our nation. It could never happen today. Or could it? In 2018, 862,000 babies were aborted in the United States. That's more than all the soldiers who have died in combat and all of the wars that our nation has ever fought. Since abortion was legalized in 1973, over 60 million babies have been aborted in the United States. The sacrifices to Moloch seem small in comparison. And I don't think that anybody aborts a child lightly. I'm so grieved by the activists who try to demonize the women who have made this hard choice. The unexpected pregnancy created a crisis. And so in a moment of weakness, out of fear of the unknown, under pressure from parents or boyfriends, having received poor counseling from agencies like Planned Parenthood, these precious women make a decision that can't be undone. And oh, how they grieve. Oh, how it affects them. Instead of condemnation, they really need compassion. But having said this, the primary reason for aborting a baby is still economic. The top reasons given for why people kill their child is that the timing was inconvenient to have the child, or having a baby would have created a financial strain, or giving birth would have disrupted a school or career goal. Over 95% of abortions have nothing to do with the mother's health or state of mind. The cost for bringing the child into the world was either too high for them or for those who cared for them. And that's just abortion. The rationales that are given for euthanizing the elderly and the severely handicapped are usually boiled down to the idea that the cost for the unproductive is too high. And one of the surprising things I learned as I researched this issue is that drug companies and research universities tend to be pro-abortion, not because they're pro-death. It's just that they're trying to find the next medical breakthrough, and they think that they need to harvest the tissues and the stem cells of these aborted babies in order to do their research. People are still sacrificing children to the God of prosperity. They're still making life and death decisions based on the value they assign to the infirm. All kinds of noble justifications are given for these acts, but in the end our society is saying life is only valuable if others say that it's valuable. And the greatest tragedy of it all is that most of us, including me, we're just really not that concerned. Oh, we know that abortions are going on, but they're not happening here in Chattanooga. We know that assisted suicide is gaining credibility, but we would never vote for it. Our response to issues in life and death are apathetic. We don't take the warning in verse 5 seriously. We don't really believe that God will reject the people, He'll reject the nations that allow these horrific acts of death. Friends, life is valuable because God endows us with value. He made us in His image. He created us for fellowship with Him. We can't afford to ignore the threats to life. We have a responsibility to actively nurture life.
Amen. Amen.
And so listen to what God has to say about human life in Psalm 139, beginning in verse 13. For you created me in my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be.
Right.
All my days, they're written in your book before we even lived the very first one.
Amen.
Friends, human life is not some cosmic accident. God created us, and more than that, He created us with purpose, a purpose that should not be taken lightly.
Amen. Amen.
Now, some people want to say that some lives are more valuable than others, more purpose-filled than others. For example, unborn babies don't weigh much against the wishes of their mothers. People who are physically or mentally handicapped people don't seem to have the same quality of life that the rest of us can experience, and so must not have as much to live for. I can still remember the frustration in my little sister's voice when she told how a doctor counseled her to have an abortion of her third child because there's a chance that child will be born with Down syndrome. I can only imagine what that doctor really thinks of a handicap. Friends, there's a logic behind what these people say, but it is not godly logic.
Amen.
You and I are not in a position to judge the eternal, not just the physical quality of life. We can't judge the eternal value of life. We don't know how God is going to use our experiences to prepare us for life going through all eternity.
Amen. Good.
God says, not you and me, God says that your life isn't an accident. You have purpose. You have value.
Amen. Good.
So that brings us to our first big question. Are other people's lives valuable to you? Important to you? Worth nurturing and guarding by you? It's easy to say yes in a general sort of way. I doubt that anyone here is for abortion. I haven't seen any petitions to legalize euthanasia. We're all duly distressed by what we see as senseless death. But I'm talking about a deeper sense of caring. A caring that I'm still growing into. Are we truly disturbed by the thought of abortion, or is it just an unpleasant thought we try not to think about? Are we involved in the lives of the elderly and the disabled, or does our discomfort keep us from engaging with them? Have we come to the place where we truly see life as a precious gift from God, or do we just take life for granted? And that brings us to the second question. If we see life as a precious gift from God, what will you and I do to guard that life, to nurture those lives, to help those lives become all that God dreams that they can be?
Amen. True.
Turn to Psalm 68. Let's listen to what God has to tell us about guarding lives. Psalm 68, beginning in verse 4. Sing to God. Sing praise to His name. Extol Him who rides in the clouds. His name is the Lord. And rejoice before Him. For He's a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, as God in His holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads forth the prisoners with singing. But the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. When you went out before your people, O God, when you marched through the wasteland, Selah, the earth shook, the heavens poured down rain before God, the one of Sinai before God, the God of Israel. God cares for the weak and the lonely and those who don't have much by worldly standards, and He does something about those needs. He gives abandoned children to parents to take care of them. He protects the widows, women who have lost their mate or who have been treated poorly by their husbands. And I love this next one. God takes lonely people and He gives them a family, and we are that family. No one should be alone in this world when there are people of God who are ready to embrace them. And God gives freedom to those who have lived in bondage. God doesn't just feel badly for us. God reaches down and He touches our lives and He gives us hope and a future. who consider themselves sons and daughters of God, we need to find our place alongside of what God is doing. We need to be part of the Father's work.
Amen. Amen.
So let's talk about what you and I can actively do to nurture life. I think about women in crisis, those who are unexpectedly pregnant. We need to embrace and encourage and help them as they prepare to bring their children into the world. I thank God for people like Joyce Turner. You know, she's quietly hosted several baby showers for co-workers who felt all alone in bringing their child into the world. She'll call me up and say, Pastor, is the fireside room available so I can have some ladies here to just cheer this precious woman on? I'm grateful for Choices Pregnancy Center, how they counsel and actively support women as they bring their child into the world for the following year. I'm so grateful, and we need to support Choices and try to cheer them on.
Good.
One of the passions of my brother, Jonathan McKinsey, he keeps bringing me back to the idea that we need to actively support single parents as they are raising up their children. You know, the need doesn't end just as the baby gets out of the hospital. We need to continue to come alongside of these fragile families and say, you're not alone. So I talked to you earlier about one of those moms that just got the apartment. We need to come alongside of her and say, we're here for you to help you raise your child to be the lovely person God dreams that we can be, that she can be. We also need to talk about adoption. I mean, not just in a general sense that adoption is good, but we need to celebrate the fact that God puts the fatherless in families. Your neighbors and your co-workers and the people that you go to school with, they need to know that there are people who would embrace their child. Some of us need to pray about fostering and adopting and bringing children into our families. We need to be ready to say yes when God begins to burden us with concern for a child that's all alone.
Amen. Good.
I'm grateful for everyone who sponsors children. It's something that my family needs to do more intentionally. We may not be able to bring children into our homes, but we can be part of providing for children all around the world so they can have a good life.
Good. Good.
Friends, an unexpected pregnancy is a crisis, but it's also an invitation. Will you and will we together choose to nurture this life that is coming into the world? And what about people with disabilities? People with disabled children? It's easy to feel isolated, to question personal value. We need to break down that isolation and clearly communicate the value that we see in them.
Amen.
One of our teenagers called me just the other day and he said, Pastor, I was thinking last night that I need to do more to help Orange Grove. I need to do more to help the adults with intellectual disabilities that use our fellowship hall throughout the week. And I was just so excited for him. I can't wait to introduce him this weekend and watch as he plays checkers or as he races the cars or plays catch or whatever. He's starting to recognize that these people are loved by God, and so he chooses to love them too.
Amen. Good. Good.
We need to train ourselves so that we can gently care for children with autism, so they can come and be part of who we are as a church, and at least for a short period of time, their parents can just lay down that burden of constant care and know that there are others who love their children. We need to shorten some of our pews and upgrade some of our bathrooms so that people in wheelchairs can come and more easily participate in what we are doing.
Good. Good.
Disabilities often leave people and often leave their families feeling like they're serving a life sentence. They're keenly aware of what they can't do. Let's offer our friendship. Let's make sure that they're not alone.
Good. Good.
A topic we're more familiar with is the stress and the pain of dying. Some of our friends have passed in recent years, and I'm so grateful that you didn't let them pass alone. You've been there for them. Several of you spending nights with Miss Kathleen so that she wouldn't be alone until she could get into a nursing facility. I'm so grateful for the sacrifice you made. You've offered respite care to the primary caregivers so that they could run their errands and so they could just breathe a little bit without the constant pressure of having to care for their loved ones that are in difficult ways. Our Dare to Care ladies write cards and they visit shut-ins every week. It's just a little reminder that our shut-ins aren't alone. Friends, what you do is the difference between hope and despair. It's a precious gift that the Father gives through you and plants in the lives of others who would otherwise feel so alone.
That's good.
In preparing for this message, I checked on the most common reasons given for assisted suicide. I expected to read of extreme pain, but it turns out that pain didn't even make the top 5 reasons for why people end their own lives. The state of Oregon, one of the states that has legalized assisted suicide, and reports the following reasons for taking one's own life: loss of independence, loss of quality of life, loss of dignity, fear of being a burden, fear of pain. In other words, the emotional pain of not knowing what tomorrow would bring. These are all quality of life issues. And people begin to say, my life isn't valuable. It isn't worth living anymore. Choosing to be present when people suffer. Choosing to help where we can. Choosing to love and to listen when everyone else turns away. You give people a reason to live. You show that their lives are more valuable in what they can do or what they contribute to society. You are the ones who express the love of God in very tangible ways and give people a reason to go on when they would otherwise give up.
Amen. That's good.
Friends, life is sometimes a difficult gift to receive, but it's still a gift. It's still valuable. It still needs to be treasured. And so we need to pray for the strength and the insight needed so that we can actively help those who struggle with living.
Amen.
Let me close with this. An unknown author once described a situation close to his home. He said, just up the road from my home is a field with 2 horses. From a distance, each looks like every other horse that you'd ever see, but as you drive your car by or if you walk by the pasture, you'll recognize that one of the horses is blind. His owner could have chosen to put him down, but instead he chose to make a place for that treasured horse to live out its life. If you stop and listen, you'll recognize that the other horse, the smaller horse, has a little bell on its halter. And as it walks around, that bell begins to ring. And every now and then, especially as the night is falling, that little horse will start making its way back to the barn, and its bell will ring, and the older, blinder horse is able to follow the sound of its friend. And that little horse will also stop and will look back to make sure that the older horse can hear that it's following into the shelter of the barn. You can tell that the 2 of them are great friends. And this is how the author summarized things. Like the owner of these 2 horses, God does not throw us away just because we're not perfect or because we have problems or challenges. He watches over us and even brings others into our lives to help us when we are in need. Sometimes we are the blind horse being guided by the little ringing bell of those that God places in our lives.
Amen. Good.
And sometimes we are the bell that helps others when they can't see. Good friends are like this. You don't always see them, but you know that they are always there. Please listen for my bell, and I will listen for yours. Friends, God did not make a mistake when He created you.
Amen. That's right.
You are valuable,
Yes.
precious in His light, in His sight.
Good.
Your life here is preparing you for eternal life that'll go on and on for forever.
Yes.
You are precious, valued, filled with purpose.
That's right.
And we need to help one another take hold of everything that God would do in and through us. We need to recognize and to love and to cherish each life that He has given.
Amen. Good. Good.
We're going to close this morning with hymn number 533. It's an invitation. Oh God, will you make me a blessing? Not just to live for my own sake, but help me to live for the sake of the people around me. And again, if you want to kneel or sit here in the front and pray, if you're burdened for somebody, burdened for these children represented here on the altar, just come. Offer yourself as an agent of grace, an agent of God's love at work in this world. I invite you to stand as we sing together, and let's say yes to the Father.
Out in